Welcome to the Church's Fellowship for Psychical and Spiritual Studies East Midlands Conference in autumn. Halloween is coming. Halloween is coming. I'd like to introduce Matt Arnold, lay pioneer minister in this area, and has been studying at degree level all things to do with paranormal, faith, God and Christianity. And as part of that, he's going to talk to us about Halloween. I'm sure Matt's going to explore this deeper, but I know from my own experience as a minister in churches and at hospitals that Halloween can be a bit of a hot potato for Christians and churches. And at Bulwell, where I am presently, we run an annual Better Than Halloween party, which is interesting in its own right. But again, you know, it can be a hot potato. So I'm hoping, and I know that Matt will unpack that whole topic for us this morning. So thank you, Matt. Let's give Matt a round of applause.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Before we start, I'm just going to have a quick prayer and then we'll kick off proper. Divine Creator, Maker of the seasons, we thank you for seed time and harvest. We thank you for life, and we actually thank you for death as well, because that is part of the life cycle. And we thank you that through the death of your Son, we can have life eternal. And we pray now that you will protect this time, and that we will learn lots from each other and from you. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, right. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I am kind of Joe's husband. I nearly said wife then. I'm kind of Joe's wife, I nearly said, but I'm Joe's husband. And I've been interested in Halloween since a kid, really. My upbringing was very strict Baptist, and my mum allowed me to cut out little pumpkins and things like that, even so. So I do have to thank her for that. Then when I got to teenage years, I discovered the truth about Halloween and was absolutely petrified by it, and would go around the town praying like mad and all that sort of thing. Then I went to university and started to learn how to do research properly. So looking at materials that are from the other angle, from an opposite perspective, and looking at source material. And as I went through the source material for Halloween, I found that it was from a very, very shallow pool of information that Christians would give out. And from that, there were a whole pile of myths that were completely debunkable by anybody who knew a little bit of history. And I kind of felt quite angry that I'd been listening to fake news, because fake news had been going on way, way back before Donald Trump got it into the popular psyche. As I said, I've just finished my Masters, and my Masters has been in Mission and Evangelism, and my dissertation was on paranormal hauntings and applications within deliverance ministry. So I like to go to my evangelical college and take the hot potatoes there. I'm not frightened of hot potatoes. If you wear gloves, you'll be all right. And if you handle appropriately, but hot potatoes are awesome. And so what I'm going to do is just present some of the information that I've discovered along my journey through Halloween, especially over the last 4 years while I've been doing my Masters. Yes, it's taken 4 years, because I've been doing that in the spare time that I had. So, we're going to start off. We are already a little bit late, but I apologise for that. We're going to look at the history of Halloween and customs explained. We're going to look at some myths, and we're going to look at some church activities as well. Then we'll go into lunch. We may go and fiddle around with lunch and put it there, depends upon how long it takes. There is flexibility in this, and if I see people sort of like nodding off, I'll know it's time for lunch. Okay. I used to be a teacher, so audience awareness is something that I've been trained in. Then we're going to look at a spooky Bible study if we get time, and particularly ghosts in Scripture, because ghosts do appear in Scripture. And then some time for questions, and then closing thoughts. If you do have questions, If they are questions that I could easily answer very quickly, and you won't know that necessarily, I will give you a quick answer back. If it's going to be one of those that's going to be in depth, then I'll say, can we park that until the question time at the end? Please remember it, because I'm not going to remember it. And then I'll have some closing thoughts at the end for us. Okay, sit back, hold tight. Here we go. But Halloween itself, I love the origin of words. I'm a bit of a male Susie Dent. I do like etymology. I love working out where words come from. So Halloween comes from Halloween, Hallows Eve, All Hallows Eve, Hallow, Old English for holy, All Holy's Eve, All Saints' Eve. So it's the eve of All Saints. Okay, the night before All Saints' Day. It's not difficult, but that's where Halloween comes from. Okay, it comes from the word itself comes from a Christian festival. So actually, Halloween has Christian festival roots. Okay, it has other roots as well, which we'll also explore in a bit. But it's the night before All Saints' Day, which is the 1st of November. And All Saints' Day is a day to celebrate all the saints in the church. Again, it does what it says on the tin. You might have patronal saints. Every Church of England has its own patronal saint or saints, but some of them have All Saints and they just lump it all together. Okay. Now, my first encounter with All Saints' Day, or All Souls, which is the day after, was walking down. I used to live in Newark, and one day a friend of mine posted up on Facebook a picture that looked a bit like this, and I thought, oh, that looks interesting. So I had a little waddle on down to the massive graveyard in Newark, which has got in it a small section for the Polish, I think they were the Polish airmen, graves. You would walk down the street, and throughout the graveyard it was absolutely pitch black. It's a big place. It was just pitch black. And as you walked down further and further, you started to see light in the darkness. And I kind of jumped over the wall and had a look around, and sure enough, all of the Polish graves here had lights in them. And I thought, wow, what's actually happening here is quite special. It is a memorial service, a memorial gathering in celebration of those who have passed on, and to remember those who have passed on. And I thought, this is actually an incredibly special time. You could almost feel it as you walked in. There was something about the atmosphere that was peaceful, even though it was pitch black in a graveyard, which is a bit weird hanging around a graveyard at night in the pitch black, but this wasn't. And it was such a stark contrast to the rest of the graves around. I thought, there's something in this that we're missing. That, by the way, isn't from the Polish graveyards, that's just pinched off the internet. But it does go to show that actually a time of remembrance we have on the 11th of November, formally, in many, many churches across all denominations. But actually there are denominations where All Saints' Day has been a part, and it goes right the way back. So we can grab hold of this. I'm going to show you a quick video of All Saints' Day in Sweden. So this is a woodland burial ground, and it is something that is particularly amazing. Okay, so apart from the nihilistic lyrics, you can actually see just how a certain area in Sweden celebrates All Saints. And it literally is for anybody of any age to go to. It's not just a kiddies party, it's for every age. And it is a solemn time. And it addresses the time that we all end up with, death. So those things that we try and push away, we often in Christianity try and push away this idea of death. We don't really like talking about it except at funerals, because it's all about life. But I think actually somewhere along the line we got warped in our understanding of what death really means and its whole thing within the Christian worldview and towards the end, the eschatological stuff. So what is All Saints' Day? Well, All Saints' Day originally came in 609 AD. Some say 610, 609 AD. Pope Boniface IV. And he basically took the Roman pantheon, which was devoted to all gods, and rededicated it to St. Mary and all martyrs. So it was taking the pagan Roman area and rededicating it. And that's gone on not just in Rome, but that's gone on throughout all the continent, where the original places of worship for the Druids and that were, they've been not destroyed, just some of the instruments some of the idols that were in there were taken, but the actual places themselves were hallowed. Okay, so it was a taking and a realigning rather than a complete destruction and removing it from the face of the earth. And that's often how the Celtic Church would work as well. Rather than just destroy anything that's been in the past that was in a different view, they actually try to see, well, where's God in all of this? So Pope Boniface takes this pantheon and dedicates it to all martyrs. And this was on the 13th of May. Well, that's nowhere near 31st of October. So what are we doing here? Well, for the next couple of hundred years, they celebrated St. Mary and all martyrs on the 13th of May, until Pope Gregory III in 835 AD comes along and he moves it to the 1st of November. So All Saints' Day became 1st of November. So from the 13th of May to the 1st of November. And actually, if you're celebrating something that is to do with remembering the dead, then having a darker part of the year makes a lot more sense than having it as the light is still getting stronger. You're actually in a time of the year when you're moving into the sort of the midwinter solstice, and that is when it's going to be the darkest point of the year. So the trees are losing their leaves, things are rotting, vegetation. It's a time to die for most of the natural world as it retreats. And actually that makes a lot more sense where we've got it now, All Saints' Day, in a place where death is just in the natural landscape as well. So it's called All Hallows' Day on the 1st of November from 835 AD. Or became All Saints' Day as we know it now. So All Hallows' Eve is the evening before All Saints' Day. Like Christmas Eve is the eve before Christmas Day. Okay? So Halloween, as a word, as a celebration, actually has its root in Christian festival. Okay? So what's happened? That lots of churches are frightened of it or wanting to have an alternative to Halloween. That's a whole different thing altogether. We've even got St. Mary and All Saints in Chesterfield. I didn't know that was the full title of it. I just knew it was St. Mary's. I didn't realise it was St. Mary's and All Saints as well. But we have an All Saints in Chesterfield, just down the road. I don't know if they do anything on All Saints' Day. I would imagine they would do. But it's interesting how it's St. Mary and All Saints, which is the same as the Roman Pantheon was back in 609 AD. Now, this is where it starts to get a bit strange, because you've got another festival, potential festival, we're not quite sure exactly if it was celebrated or not properly. Now, you can always tell when you're watching a YouTube clip if somebody doesn't know what they're talking about with this particular festival, because they call it as it's pronounced, as it says as it's spelt, Samhain. So anybody who pronounces themselves as an ex-witch or an ex-Satanist or whatever, and then says, we were celebrating Samhain, you can go, I don't believe you. Okay? It's actually pronounced Samhain. It comes from the Gaelic, the Irish Gaelic. I don't know if, is it Gaelic or Gaelic, the Irish? Gaelic, okay, Gaelic.
Gaelic in Scotland.
Gaelic in Scotland, thank you. I've learned, see, I told you I learned something today as well, I like this. It has uncertain prehistoric origins. Nothing was written down before a certain ecclesiastical chap called Bede, the Venerable Bede, came along and started to write about it. And he wrote about it being something like an Irish holiday. It wasn't Celtic in the sense that Scotland and Wales and the ancient Gauls, the Celtic that came across there, they didn't celebrate Samhain. It's only in Ireland that it's celebrated. So you can't really say that it's a Celtic celebration because the Celtic is a massive bunch of tribes. It's only pertinent, Samhain is, to Ireland. And remember, Ireland and pumpkins, we'll come back to that in a bit. So Samhain, we think pretty much means summer's end. If you type it into Google Translate and you take the Gaelic and put Samhain in, it'll come up as summer's end. And it comes from the and now this is where I am going to pronounce it incorrectly, the Tochmach Emer, which is a 10th century poem called The Wooing of Emer. And this is this is where we get an idea about Samhain from. That I shall fight without harm to myself from Samhain, i.e. the end of summer. For two divisions were formerly on the year. There's summer from Beltane, the 1st of May, and winter from Samhain to Beltane. So actually there were two seasons. There was summer and winter. From medieval Irish literature, there are mythological references to Samhain. It was a time when tribal assemblies were held. They passed laws so that people got together and they made laws, exchanged information between the tribes. It was also a time when they believed the spirits, the monsters, the fairies attacked the royal capitals and they caused physical destruction to them and cast evil spells on them. Okay, so this is some of the idea behind Samhain itself. And we get these things called Hallowe'en fires, which were first mentioned in 1589. Now, I told you I liked my etymology, so I went on Google, bonfire etymology. You've got the origin, English is bone, English fire, bone fire. You've got the French there, bon. Now, some people say it comes from a good fire. It is a fire that is good. They're using Dr. Johnson, the guy with the dictionary. If you know your Blackadder, you'll know about sausages and things like that. But Dr. Johnson, bit of a difference. Dr. Johnson thought that the etymology of bonfire came from good fire. Actually, it doesn't. It comes from the Old Anglo-Saxon for bone fire. And it was a time when the livestock was slaughtered. And you would slaughter your weakest livestock. You wouldn't want your weakest livestock going into winter, eating up all of those nice food reserves and possibly being sickly and not making it through the winter anyway. So they've eaten up all the food, but they've been so genetically poor, as it were, they've not been very well, that they've wasted that food pretty much. So you slaughtered your weakest livestock and you burnt the bones. You would burn the bones to ash. Ash is great for part of the soap making process and that sort of stuff, and the tanning process. So you would use that to take the skins off. This is going to get a bit squeamish, I'm sorry, but you would take the skins off your livestock and you would use them to produce clothing, shoes, that sort of stuff that you would use leather for. You'd have all of the soap stuff with the fats as well that you could make the ash and the fat. And it would be called Blood Month in Old Anglo-Saxon or Old English. And that was Blood Month. So it was the month when the blood ran because of the slaughter that happened. Whether that was going on as a sacrifice to some gods around that time, we can't tell. We really don't know that. Okay, but what we do know is just common sense says you get rid of your weakest livestock before you take the flock into the winter. And of course, it would be a time for having a great festival, wouldn't it? I mean, let's face it, you've got all this meat, you could salt some of it and preserve it, but you may as well have a bit of a knees up with your tribe. Maybe, you've got other people coming from other tribes, put on a big feast. We do that when we have leaders from different countries coming together, they have a big feast. So it makes a lot of sense that it could be that the tribes themselves would be having a bit of a knees up. And of course, probably the mead would flow as well, and the apple wine. So, some of these Halloween customs themselves, we're going to have a little look at those. So, the origin of trick-or-treating. Who's ever gone trick-or-treating?
I've gone guising.
You've gone guising, right. We'll talk about that. You're Scottish, that would be why then. You're going to be coming up here and telling us about that in a bit. Well, okay, I'll do that if you... No, I will now, you said. Okay, so this was a practice that was brought over to Canada by Scottish and Irish immigrants in the mid to late 1800s. Okay, and the first instance that we've got of dressing up on Halloween is in Vancouver in British Columbia in 1898. That's the first instance we've got of dressing up for Halloween. Okay, but the practice itself of trick-or-treating had come in before then, but people didn't dress up as much. Okay, the first phrase trick-or-treat appears in the Lethbridge Herald in Canada on the 4th of November 1927, and it explains about what people were doing in that area, that they were going around from door to door. And since the World War II came along just afterwards, you would have sugar rationing, which meant that going around asking for sweets really wasn't a done thing. But after the 50s, when rationing ceased, you would get that sort of thing happening where sweets were being passed out at the doors instead. And its origins are in souling, which is a 15th century practice. Now, this is interesting because what you would do if you were very poor at this time of the year, you would go around knocking on the doors, especially of those that were more well off, and you would offer prayers for the dead. And from that, you would be given soul cake. You would be given something like this. You can go and look at recipes for soul cakes. In fact, why not have soul cakes for Halloween evening and pass those out? You could try that. Secularisation followed on after that as we get into the 18th, 19th century. But it even makes an appearance in some Shakespeare, like a beggar at Hallowmas in The Two Gentlemen of Verona. Now, in Protestant times, going around and praying for the dead is a bit of an odd thing. We don't pray for the dead. But back then they did, and actually certain traditions still do pray for the dead. And now the Anglican Church, I believe, in the last century, changed its attitude and said that actually, okay, you can pray for the dead as long as it's towards Christ. You pray for them, not to them. And personally, I mean, I come from a Fundy evangelical background, so I've become a real heretic, me. When I was doing some of my dissertation for my masters, praying for the dead appeared in that as a potential way of working out how to bring deliverance to a place that is experiencing psychic issues, hauntings, that sort of stuff. Because it actually seems to work. And picking on the theology of that is going to take a whole pile of time, which I've got lunch. You can go for it if you like. But praying for the dead, I don't myself have any issues for that now. I pray to God for that particular person. No issues. And it does seem actually to make a lot of sense, because if you do believe that there is one body of Christ, whether they are alive in the flesh or alive out of the flesh, they are still alive. And we don't have any problem saying to somebody, oh, can I pray for you? Whether they're a Christian or not. So why not pray afterwards? But that comes down to the whole, oh no. And that comes down to the whole idea about can anything change once you've died? Okay, now dressing up itself has some interesting origins. We've always dressed up when we've been doing things with the spiritual side of things, right the way back into ancient times when somebody would put on the skin of an animal and that sort of thing to try and do some shamanic practices. But the dressing up at Halloween could have its origins. We don't quite know, but we do think it could be from the dance macabre. At this point, all I can hear is the theme tune for Jonathan Creek going around in my head. But the dance macabre was the dance of death. Okay? There was a lot of death and disease and warfare in the 15th century. We kind of have this attitude towards death that's it's been very sanitised. We have funeral directors that do all of the preparation of bodies, and it could be that even you don't see the dead body of your relative once they've gone, once they've passed on. But the dance of death was something that was very much in the mind of the church at the time, because death itself is the great leveller of all social strata. I can't remember which band said, but you might be a king or a street sweeper, but one day soon you'll dance with the reaper. We will all die, just like we will all pay taxes. Okay? We will all die, whatever age that might be, whatever social strata that might be. It is a leveller. And actually that's something to be thankful for, because just imagine what it would be like if we didn't die. Just imagine the most terrible people that we've come across who've committed massive crimes against others, and they don't die. And those are questions, well, what about the child that's never done any of that? Why do they die? But these are questions that we can brush under the carpet, and we need to actually address. And around this time of the year is a great time to do it. It really is. So the dressing up, the dance macabre, this was the dance of death was first on the wall of the cemetery of the Holy Innocents in Paris, and it was a mural that went right across the inside of what looks like a bit of a cloisters. You can see there's a lot of skulls up in the top there, and you might have seen some of the churches in the continent are just made up of bones. They've got skulls and the bones of the monks that used to live there and all of that sort of stuff. You look and you think, this is a bit weird. Why have they got all these bones out here? But it's a kind of a memento mori. Remember, you will die. And all of these murals had different people from different strata of society in it. And underneath it would be a little spiel about this particular kind of person, and yeah, eventually they're going to die as well. And the graveyard that it was here wasn't just a graveyard where people just only went in to put some flowers on the grave or whatever. It was part of the everyday life. People would be walking in and out of it all the time. There'd be things going on in the graveyard, selling and buying of stuff. But all along the church had got this. You're all going to face death at some point. And so you would have these skeletons that would be leading the Hierophant, the Pope, the King, all to the grave. It's a bit macabre, isn't it? Well, that's why it's called the dance macabre. Imagine your churches having this on. We're like, live! Jesus is alive on our posters and that sort of stuff. And yet you've got this whole tapestry, almost mural of you are going to die at some point. We don't really think about death very much in church. We just see sort of like, let's give our life to Jesus and that's our ticket to a better way. But actually we need to think about life before death as well. And this is what it was saying. Think about life before death. Do what you can while you can. And it travelled across the continent. Lots of different countries, lots of different times as it moves its way through. And then of course into that mix you've also got Carnival. Another great leveller. You've got a mask. You don't know who the person is that you're speaking to. It could be the king, it could be a beggar. You really do not know. So masked balls, anybody been to Venice? Yeah, you get those Venetian masks, beautiful things. We have a celebration time of dressing up. And let's face it, that's what happens on a Friday and a Saturday night, isn't it, ladies? And gents. Except we don't worry too much as blokes. Some of us do. But we dress up and we go out. And that's what celebration does. We like to dress up. It's just a natural human thing, dressing up. And then guising, which comes from souling, which was going around praying for the dead. But Mary, would you like to just sort of like give us a few sentences about sort of what you would do for guising?
Guising's nothing like trick-or-treating.
Nothing like it at all?
Nothing at all.
Go on.
You would knock on doors, as that, and you would have to perform. Part of it was that you would say a poem, you would do a dance, you would entertain. And if they liked it, you got a reward.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was silver, sometimes it was sweets. And your guise was often dressing as your mum or your gran. You weren't wearing exotic costumes like you do today. It was whatever you found in the cupboard and you changed yourself. And it was very much like, I've never say to you that trick-or-treating in Canada is like trick-or-treating in the 1950s. Now.
Yeah.
Gentle and calm.
Yeah.
You know. But that was guising, and you were taken into the house. You didn't do it on steps. You were taken into people's front rooms.
So you've got these different threads all coming to make up what we now have as trick-or-treat. You've got your guising, which was the gentle stuff. You've got your dressing up and having a bit of a laugh. You've got your, we are going to die. And intermixed with that as well, some of that dressing up from the 15th, 16th century was poking fun at evil forces. So you would dress up to mock death. You would dress up to mock the devil. It would be a mockery, like I'm alive, you're not, sort of thing. That's kind of the attitude they would have. So lots of threads have come in for all of this. And if you just choose to pick one particular thread and attack that and say you can't do trick-or-treating because it's associated with this, you've actually missed the whole point of what the whole history of trick-or-treat has come from. From the gentle stuff through to what we now have as our consumer fest. You've got kiddies dressing up in some nice costumes, pumpkins, witches, zombies and all that sort of stuff. But also you've got these, we've got some pretty gross ones as well. I'm not a big fan of dressing up in gross costumes. But we have, when Joe and I were at Abingdon, we put on a band on Halloween, and some people came with a pumpkin head and blood sheets and all that sort of stuff. Like, that's not what we're about, guys. Okay, so there's another one, another custom, apple bobbing. Who's gone apple bobbing? Yeah, you've got to go apple bobbing. Its origins are actually in love and romance. It was a British courting ritual. And there were lots of different rules, but one of the rules was you assigned an apple, each apple was a potential mate. Okay? Don't know if you drew the name on it or whatever. And if you got that apple, so you'd have your big pile of apples in the bucket, and you would try and go for that particular one. If you got it in one bite, you were destined for romance. Ooh! If you got it in two, you would court, but it would be a failure. 3, basically, don't even bother. It's just doomed. The other one was first to get a bite is the first to marry. Now, how many churches here have the bride throw their bouquet over their shoulder? What's the tradition there? What if you
Catch it, you're married.
catch it and you get married? Yeah, exactly. So we don't worry about that, but somehow some people get a bit stressy about apple bobbing. For me, it's just a case of, well, apples are around this time of the year. It's a great fun game to play. Let's face it, I've had a game where we took a pudding bowl and we packed it full of flour when I was a teenager. And you turn it upside down, you basically make a flower castle. And then you put a wine gum on the top and you have to put your hands behind your back and you've got to get the wine gum out of the flour with, and of course your face will be completely covered. It's just a bit of fun, guys. It's nothing to stress about.
My son did that 2 years ago in his bedroom.
Oh!
That wasn't fun, Matt.
He thought it was.
It's done a lot. The apple bobbing, still in guides and scouts. And
Yeah.
those organised.
There's nothing evil about a game of skill. And yet some people try and set it up as an evil game because of the origins of sort of this being a potential mate. Well, you can divorce the origin from what you're doing with it now. It's your intention of what you're doing now that really makes a big difference. It's only really recently that we've had this big backlash against Halloween. I mean, some of the myths that we've got come from, I have to say, America. And the backlash against the American tradition of Halloween seems to have created its whole shallow pool of misinformation. And when I was a kid, I would get these little tracts given to me by my church. These are called chick tracts. And they're like little cartoon. I wish I'd got some with me. I can't force myself to buy a whole pile of them just to get samples. They're about that big, and they're like a comic book. And you think, wow, these are great for kids. You know, you give them out at Halloween. It's got a little bit of a message at the back about Jesus. And you give them out with the sweets at Halloween, and you think, wow. So this is one from the Devil's Night. Today, kids celebrate Halloween on October the 31st, but back then, it was a horrible night. The pagan priests taught that Saman, the Lord of Death, called back all the souls of the dead who had entered into animals. No idea where he's got that from. They believed these souls visited their families for a few hours. The people were terrified. They lit huge fires, put on masks and animal costumes, and danced around the fires to drive those evil spirits away. What's Saman? There is no Celtic Lord of the Dead. I'm sorry, that doesn't exist. Here's another one. Oh, Susie, I'm so glad I didn't live back then. But what about trick or treat? That's when it started, Buffy. I like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Here's how they did it. Pagan priests would go house to house demanding an offering of food for their gods. You've got no food. Then we'll take a child. You're giving these out to small children on the door, by the way. It's like, wow, okay. One of the things you've got to remember is that pagan back then is very different to pagan now. Pagan now, you wouldn't get any of that at all, but you didn't have it back then. I mean, trick or treat, we've already looked at see where that came from and the origins of it. It's got nothing to do with these pagan priests going around demanding food for their gods.
So that isn't that one of the reasons when my generation were young, we had all those sorts of pictures going around that we would not like Halloween as we grow up.
Yeah, we've been inoculated.
Yeah.
We've been inoculated by false information,
Yeah.
fake news. And this is why when I said I was doing a talk on Halloween, one of my friends said, well, Christians can't celebrate Halloween. I'm like, actually, it's a Christian festival. You can celebrate the eve of all
They
Hallows.
didn't come then today.
They didn't come, no, because they live down in Dudley. Too far away. Here's another one. Becky, what do you think what do you think you are, Becky, a psychiatrist? Oh, now, this is where we get the interesting stuff. No, I'm an ex-witch. Now I serve Jesus. Expletive deleted. I should have suspected it. Let me tell you the truth, underlined in with italics in bold, about Halloween. It came from an ancient Druid custom set up for human sacrifices on Halloween night. Druids offered children in sacrifices. They believed that only the fruit of the body offered to Satan was for the sin of the soul. Paraphrase from a book called The Two Babylons by Hislop. That's been completely debunked by historians, by the way, but it's still in publication and it's still in the tracts. We don't know a lot about Druids. We'll have a look at what we do know about Druids. Certainly Druids weren't offering to Satan, because that didn't come on the scene. And yet, we've got an ex-witch, allegedly, telling the truth about Halloween. I know a lot of witches. I do know a lot of witches. And they will tell you that this is complete rubbish. And if you look at any historical evidence, it will also tell you that it's rubbish. And yet you look at the Christians who say it's true, but hold on, the Christians are bearing false witness against their neighbour. Here's another one. The trick-or-treat custom was created by the Druids. No, it was not! When they went to a home and demanded a child or virgin for sacrifice, the victim was the Druid's treat. What? In exchange, they would leave a jack-o'-lantern with a lighted candle made of human fat to prevent those inside being killed by demons that night. Like a demon's going to look at a candle and go, ooh. When some unfortunate couldn't meet the demands of the Druids, then it was time for the trick. A symbolic hex was drawn on the front door. That's the Star of David. But okay, the whole thing about symbols, people nick each other's symbols all the time. What is going on here? This is a bit weird. Oh, that was an ancient custom. That's not what our Halloween is about. Wrong, Brenda. The same thing is going on today, only it's much more subtle. I know from personal experience that Halloween was carefully planned by Satan to accomplish several things. What things? You can see there's a lot of stuff in there that is overkill and hasn't really got its origins. And the trouble is, if you're passing this stuff out, somebody who knows their stuff is going to turn around and go, that's rubbish, that's wrong, here's the evidence, here's the real stuff. And what do you do then? You have to say, well, is what the Christian tract producer has said is true, or is what the person who knows their history says is true? And you've got this conflict going on there. So let's have a look at some British Druids. We don't actually know very much about them, the ancient Druids at all. The closest thing that we've got to something that we think might be a Druid, but we're not quite sure, it could be anything, but we think Druids wore these ecclesiastical garments. And by the way, Druids today do buy their robes from ecclesiastical suppliers. Seriously, because they make the best quality ones rather than the cheap, tatty polyester ones. They make proper stuff. We've got these three figures in culculus, which are like these robes that go over the top with the pointy hats. And they were on a shrine at Hadrian's Wall. And history is always written by the winners. Okay, by the victors. Tacitus, Roman historian, in his Annals, 14, chapter 30, on the beach, this, by the way, is when the Roman army was going to attack Anglesey. Okay, and you've got the Druids in Anglesey. And on the beach stood the adverse array, a serried mass of arms and men, with women flitting between the ranks. In the style of the Furies, in robes of deathly black and with dishevelled hair, they brandished their torches, while a circle of Druids, lifting their hands to heaven and showering imprecations, struck the troops with such an awe at the extraordinary spectacle that, as though their limbs were paralysed, they exposed their bodies to wounds without an attempt at movement. Then, reassured by their general, and inciting each other never to flinch before a band of females and fanatics, they charged behind the standards, cut down all who met them, and enveloped the enemy in his own flames. That's the Romans going in and killing the Druids. And that's its recorded account by Tacitus. Okay? So, That's all pretty much we know about the Druids, written down. So where's the bit about going from door to door asking for somebody to sacrifice and putting a hex on the door and all that sort of stuff? It's not there because it didn't happen. It's in the imagination of somebody who's just making money out of selling tracts to people. Well, if you think that's bad, the Romans sort of bad-mouthing the Druids, this is what Minucius Felix said about the Christians in the 1st century. Okay? As for the initiation of new members, the details are as disgusting as they are well known. The novice himself, deceived by the coating of dough covering a sacrificial infant, thinks that the stabs are harmless. Then it's horrible. They hungrily drink the blood and compete with one another as they divide his limbs. And the fact that they all share knowledge of the crime pledges them all to silence. On their feast day, they foregather with all their children, sisters, mothers, people of either sex and of all ages. Now, in the dark, they used to meet in catacombs. Now in the dark, so favourable to shameless behaviour, they twine the bonds of innameable passion, as chance decides. Precisely the secrecy of this evil religion proves that all these things, or practically all, are true.
That solves something for me. So I had a conversation at midnight, I was working nights, with an auxiliary nurse, who was telling me about this Catholic. And you know that Catholics eat babies. Now, she didn't know she was speaking to a Catholic. So I let her go on, and then we had a conversation, and then we resolved issues. But I've often wondered where this came from.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's ever offered me a baby.
Not going down that road.
It's like, I've never heard it before. It's not like something, it's not like something I asked to speak about.
Yeah.
And she was so sincere and so horrified.
So put yourself now in the position of a modern day Druid, and somebody's telling people that that's what they do. I know a lot of Druid friends as well, and they don't do the stuff that was supposed to be told about them at all, and they're horrified by this. So if we, as Christians, are horrified by the way the Romans treated us, can you imagine how other people, pagans, feel about the way Christians are bad-mouthing them? This is why I do what I do, and why I'm talking today, is because we actually need to educate ourselves. Okay? Ignorance creates fear. And actually, perfect love casts out fear, the Bible says. And so actually, if we perfectly love someone, we will listen to what they say. And we will try and find out what they believe from them. Go to the source. Don't go to Jack Chick's tracts or other books. I mean, even myself, when I was growing up, I grew up on apologetics, arguing the faith. I was a bit of a feisty, argumentative type. I've changed, haven't I, a lot, Joe? And but even then, when you're looking at some of the stuff by, say, Josh McDowell, he talks about Samhain, the Lord of the Dead. And you're like, no, you've just dipped into that same shallow pool of misinformation, guys. So we've got to be careful about what we say. Is it true? And often a lot about Halloween isn't. And St Columba, he was the Irish evangelist of Scotland, created the cathedral on Iona, the monastery on Iona. He wrote, and again, this is Gaelic, Scottish, Modru Mac Day, which basically means my druid is Christ, the Son of God. So Jesus, for St Columba, was his archdruid. Now, if the Druids were as bad as the Romans had said they were, if they were going around door to door knocking and asking for sacrificial victims, if that was true, then what is St Columba calling Jesus the arch one of these type of characters? That makes no sense. The Druids were the holy people of the tribes of that time. In fact, some people say that they were the proto-evangelists, as it were, when the Christians came in. God was already at work on these islands through the work of the Druids. God doesn't just speak to Christians or Jews. he speaks to Gentiles as well. Okay? So my druid is Christ, the Son of God, and yet Halloween started in the British Isles with the Druids. Well, just in case, these guys were really spooky. Okay? Halloween didn't start in the British Isles. Halloween started not with the Druids, but with the Christians. 609 AD, Boniface, 13th of May, shifted 835, St. Gregory III, Pope Gregory III. Wasn't the Druids? No. That's debunked. There are Druids today, just as there are pagans today. I actually went to a public lecture in Nottingham University about 5-6 years ago on pagan Britain. And it was a guy called Ronald Hutton, Professor Ronald Hutton. Some of you might have seen him on the telly. He kind of wheeled in for these wartime farm, Victorian farm type programmes, Edwardian farm programmes and that. He's the historian. He's a really good bloke, a lovely chap, lovely chap. And he asked people, because he said any questions, and somebody put up in this massive auditorium, about 300-400 people, somebody said, but there aren't any pagans today. And you could see Ronald's face of like a big smile. He said, put your hand up if you're a pagan. And about 1/4 to 1/3 of the hands went up. This bloke who asked it was like, oh, what do I do now? Are they going for my baby? It's like, oh dear, guys, you really have got to learn. And you can only do that by conversations and dialogue with people who believe different things to you. So, Druid Reconstructionists, the first sort of guy that kind of reinvented Druidry in the British Isles was a guy called William Stukeley. He was the first archaeologist. He was your sort of Carenza. Remember her from time to time? He was the first Carenza, or I can't remember the names of the other guys. But and he'd got all of these things like Stonehenge and Avebury and all of that, and he's like, what on earth are these things all about? And so he kind of invented this religion called Druidry, or reinvented, as it were. Then a guy called Edward Williams, who's also known as Iolo Morganwg, he just basically invented rituals and history. He just wrote fantasy stuff about it. And some of it's actually quite interesting to read. But it was to kind of explain why we've got these big stone circles, why we've got these Wayland Smithy barrows and all that sort of stuff. There are 3 types of modern Druidry. There's the cultural Druidry, the fraternal Druidry, and the neo-pagan Druidry. Okay, now, interestingly, does anybody know who this guy is?
Yeah, that's not his name.
He's a fairly famous guy, Rowan Williams. Rowan Williams, dressed as a Druid, but yes, Rowan Williams is a Druid. Where does he come from? Wales. Okay? Rowan Williams is actually a holy person. The Druids were holy people. He's actually a cultural Druid. That doesn't mean to say he does pagan Druidry type stuff, but he does do other types of stuff which is totally compatible with Christianity. Okay? So, Druidry is one of those wide umbrellas that can incorporate all sorts of different beliefs. It's just a way of relating to the landscape and the one that makes the landscape. Certainly isn't anything that the Tacitus comes up with. Well, what about Samhain, or Samhain? Samhain, the Lord of the Dead. Well, that's another myth that's come from a guy called Colonel Valancy in 1770. He wrote a book that was trying to prove the Irish came from Armenia. And it's been debunked massively as ahistorical. Even in 1880, the Quarterly Review basically wrote of General Valancy, more nonsense than any man of his time. Okay, he was not taken seriously, but he wrote stuff about Samhain, the Lord of the Dead, and he named it as that. Not the fact that it comes from Summer's End, the end of summer. And that got picked up by a guy called Godfrey Higgins, who wrote a book called The Celtic Druid in 1827. And in it, it talks about Samhain, the Lord of the Dead. There's no evidence. No evidence at all that Samhain was a deity. There was no Celtic Lord of the Dead. There were gods and goddesses that were associated with death, Morrigan and that sort of thing. But actually, Samhain it just means sun's end. It's not the Lord of the Dead. If you want to Google W.J. Bethencourt III, Halloween Myths, Monsters and Devils, that will give you a huge debunking of Godfrey Higgins's The Celtic Druids. But we haven't got time to go into that today. But was it a feast for the dead then? Some people say, well, it might, they had a big feast and it was to celebrate the dead. Well, that comes from James Fraser's Golden Bough, which some of that is also quite fanciful. The only basis that he's got is because it's near to All Saints' Day, which wasn't originally the 1st of November, it was the 13th of May. And the problem is as well that Ireland converted to Christianity before then. So before it was way before All Saints' Day was invented. So it was nothing to do with the Feast of the Dead at all. What about jack-o'-lanterns? Who's carved a pumpkin? I've carved a pumpkin. Who's done the good thing with the pumpkin seeds and grown them afterwards? We grew some. Who makes pumpkin pie? Soup, pumpkin soup as well? Pumpkin curry?
Oh, nice.
Now there's something to try. Ooh, yeah.
Secret recipe.
Ooh. You're not allowed to leave without it.
I'll send it you.
This is a tradition that comes from from Ireland to Northern America, and it was originally a turnip, right? So think about those cartoons of the Druids that were leaving a jack-o'-lantern pumpkin. Yeah. Pumpkins don't come from Ireland, they come from Northern America. The Druids didn't know what pumpkins were. Okay. Anyway, it comes from the story of Stingy Jack. So I'm going to read the story of Stingy Jack to you very quickly. Stingy Jack was a miserable old drunk who took pleasure in playing tricks on just about everyone. Family, friends, his mother, and even the devil himself. One day he tricked the devil into climbing up an apple tree. After the devil climbed up the tree, Stingy Jack hurriedly placed crosses around the trunk of the tree. Crafty. Unable to touch a cross, the devil was stuck in the tree. Surely you could jump down, but anyway. Stingy Jack made the devil promise not to take his soul when he died. Once the devil promised not to take his soul, Stingy Jack removed the crosses and the devil climbed down out of the tree. Many years later, Jack died and he went to the pearly gates of heaven and was told by St. Peter that he was mean and cruel and had led a miserable, worthless life on earth. Stingy Jack was not allowed to enter heaven. He then went down to hell. And the devil kept his promise and would not allow him to enter hell either. Oh, stuck. Now Jack's scared. He's got nowhere to go but to wander about forever in the dark, netherworld between heaven and hell. He asked the devil how he could leave, and as there was no light. The devil tossed him an ember from the flames of hell to help Stingy Jack light the way. Jack had a turnip with him. It was one of his favourite foods. And he always carried one with him, as you do. Jack hollowed out the turnip and placed the ember the devil had given him inside the turnip. From that day onwards, Stingy Jack roamed the earth without resting place, lighting his way as he went with his jack-o'-lantern. On All Hallows Eve, the Irish hollowed out trumpets, gourds, potatoes and beets. They placed a light inside them to ward off evil spirits and to keep Stingy Jack away. These were the origins of the jack-o'-lantern, and then they started to come through with the Irish immigrants into America. And the pumpkins, they're much easier to carve, let's face it, if you've got a big one. Yeah, mind you, I always end up with bruises around there.
I've actually carved the turnip. We couldn't get a pumpkin when you ran it, it's not easy.
So what's that picture, Matt?
That picture is a early 20th century pumpkin, jack-o'-lantern. Sorry, not pumpkin. An early 20th century jack-o'-lantern made from a turnip.
All our jack-o'-lanterns were made of turnips, and they are hard.
Yes.
No.
Because they're solid, aren't they?
Oh, yes.
They haven't got this big sort of load of seed stuff in the
They're
middle.
not big.
No. I mean, I'd be really stuffed with big hands.
Yeah, electric drills.
Electric drills.
Yeah.
That's really weird, that is. That's just going to look like a real horror film, that is. And then, of course, you get Washington Irving's Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Anybody ever seen that? The Johnny Depp film? That's great. It's a good TV series as well. But that talks about the headless horseman that comes along carrying a pumpkin carved for a head, sort of thing. And that's kind of where it really comes from, that whole 19th century type stuff, 18th century. So the jack-o'-lantern, here we go. Oh, mighty Satan, we sacrifice this cat to you on your birthday. Satan had a birthday on the 31st of October. Okay, where's that come from? Crash, buzz, here we go, look. As I don't want the cat as my sacrifice, I want Carrie. They know their horror films, don't they? 40 minutes later, you're next. Oh, die you fiend. Blam, blam. What is it? Surprise, run, it's the devil himself. Oh, come on, guys. Really? But this is what we're giving out to kids in these kind of, it's a bit weird. So October the 31st was a night of terror called Samhain. That night, the Druids went from house to house taking victims, and they left the jack-o'-lantern, which was supposed to protect the home from death demons that night. No. Stingy Jack, a light. Okay, maybe it was supposed to sort of ward off evil spirits, but, you know, people put crosses on walls and things as well, that sort of stuff. I usually find prayer works quite well. But, you know, what's wrong in carving a pumpkin with a scary face on? It's not like it's going to do anything to you. And then this one, apples and pomona. So this is a weird one. This is the whole thing about apple bobbing is said as evil because it's not just divinatory. You're going to find out who you're going to marry, but it's worship and bowing down to the goddess Pomona, the Roman goddess of the harvest of fruits, not apples. Again, the French, pomona. You could see where somebody would go, oh, actually that's to do with apples. It was, I know, let's invent this idea where you're bowing down and worshipping Pomona as you dip into the bucket. Really? Plus a betrothal festival smack bang in the middle of the 13th of May and 31st of October. It's nowhere near the two. Yeah, crazy. But as art has gone on, you can see the ancient Romans would have a whole veritable bag of different types of fruits. There's the different types of fruits, although there's an apple, and then as we get to the modern times, apples, just purely apples. And it's just linked back to the incorrect use of French.